1910. Lights rehearsed a fall. The ground was never touched. They called it a firework until it refused to end. On a wind-polished night in March 1910, the coast between Cromer and Great Yarmouth kept even breaths, the lighthouse sending its disciplined blink while fishing smacks stitched dull lines across the water. At 8:17, a light appeared over the sea, pale as frost and too steady for sparks. It advanced without wobble, carrying a dimmer twin aft and a third gleam that swung like a lantern on long rope. Glass in cottage windows trembled, not with sound but with a pressure you feel in enamel. In the diary, he wrote it simply, "Airship," then scratched the word and wrote, "Visitor." It moved inland at a height that made roofs respectful, low enough for a boy to throw his cap if courage agreed. Dogs followed it along lanes, paw pads ticking on frozen ruts, while women stepped into doorways, holding their aprons like flags of truce. A railway porter counted the seconds between the forward lamp and the swinging one, and got the same answer 3 times. Which satisfied him beyond reason. It passed over the telegraph office. Inside, the clerk's sounder rattled a nonsense dash that tried to be a letter and failed politely. Behind him, the wall map wore a pin for every place a Zeppelin might reasonably go. The light took none of those routes. It drifted toward beet fields and the parish that kept its church unlocked, and the bell there chimed once by itself as if good manners required it. Farther along, a fisherman heard canvas talking to air and the tone sails keep at 3 in the morning. He looked for a silhouette and found the opposite, a darker dark against night, long as a parable, unhurried as a cart in snow. In the diary, the keeper underlined visitor and added silent. Then, because weather keeps better when measured, he noted wind, tide, and the peculiar absence of both engine and concern. The morning after, the town assembled a neat confusion. Railwaymen swore their signal lamps had dimmed when the thing passed. A constable wrote that the wireless in Mr. Lacey's shop sang a pure tone without letters, and the cat on the counter lifted its head as if to translate. Farm girls said a rope brushed the hedge and left dew walking in droplets like beads. A baker held up his scorched tray and declared that heat had touched it, though his oven was cold. The newspaper printed the word "scare" in a font so large it frightened its own column. At the lifeboat shed a boy produced his treasure, a length of braided cord smooth as fingernails, tar-scented, too fine for coastal work. The coxswain weighed it in his palm and said nothing, which served as an opinion. The schoolmaster dusted chalk across a slate and demonstrated how a moving lantern, hung low, could pretend to swing if the eye wished it. The town watched the diagram obey and did not feel better. Telegrams spread like frost along the wire. Lowestoft claimed a sighting at 8:32, Norwich at 8:45, a hamlet with an honest name at 8:51, and then again at 8:51 from the other direction, which made the clerk grin until he remembered he was on duty. The Admiralty replied with a sentence cut to fit a postcard. No hostile airships reported. Stop, observe, and report stop. An aunt wrote from Hull to say they had angels the week before and could lend one if ours proved defective. That night, the keeper climbed the stairs with a picnic of coffee and doubt. Clouds lay like unrolled bandages. The lantern glass felt colder inside than out. At 9:11, the horizon grew a small additional star where there was no room. It brightened, steadied, and gathered to itself a shape that preferred not to be named. The keeper wrote, with a hand that disapproved of speed, again. Word of descent arrived before the descent itself, which is the town's way with news. A carman on the Harwich Road told the tap room he had seen a fire descending slowly beyond the sugar factory, like conscience, and men laughed because metaphors do not help lift buckets. They ran anyway, carrying ropes, lanterns, and the useful lies men tell one another about being in time. Above the fields, a glow hung like a second dawn that had mistaken its hour. In the beat ground, the air smelt of hot varnish and winter brass. The glow breathed, then thinned, then brightened again until it drew a faint ring of condensation on a cottage window that faced the wrong way. A long, soundless sigh traveled the hedges. Children who should have been in bed were not, and they would never forget the shape that sat briefly inside the light. An almond, a seed, a ribbed moon dragged through milk. Skyfall, the publican said under his breath, and nobody corrected him. The thing came down without hurry, and then, within a hand's span of earth, changed its mind. The glow folded, the ring on the window dissolved, the frost that had turned the furrows to porcelain learned water again. Men with ropes stood with ropes and felt useful in theory only. They found marks that behaved like proofs, two parallel dents in the rime curving together and stopping. A scuff on a byre roof like wind had remembered claws. A patch of frozen turnip leaves pressed flat in an ellipse the size of a cart. On the lane, a child picked up a small brass fitting threaded inside like a thimble for giants. The keeper wrote in his diary, descended, then after a pause, did not. He blotted carefully, as if blotting could prevent the world from smearing further. Search began at a reasonable hour and lost reason by noon. The constable walked the hedges with his hat in his hand, collecting affidavits, which is what you call stories when you persuade them onto paper. The lifeboatmen took the creek and found only tide. Cyclists traced the lanes until the map looked tired of being helpful. A sergeant from the Air Defense Battery arrived with a tape and a face set to inches. He measured dents in frost and declared them indecisive, which Frost had already declared without paperwork. In the sugar factory office, a telephone rang like an insect trapped under glass. The manager reported a roof tile lifted and set down 5 feet away without broken edges, and a smell of petrol that drifted without a source. On a laundry line, 3 shirts faced south, though the wind insisted on north. In a spinney, a rookery had fallen silent, then resumed, and the pause was timed by a boy who claimed talent for such things. He said 37 seconds. The sergeant wrote 36. A photographer with a tripod and confidence took 3 long exposures toward an empty sky and developed them in the back room of the chemist. On the plates, ovals marched diagonally, pale against pale, each the length of a thumbnail held at arm's reach. The chemist wrote halation on the sleeve, and then did not throw the plates away because halation does not usually arrange itself in parade order. The newspaper elected to print the weather again. By afternoon, the Admiralty wire came warmer. Observe without alarm. The town complied in its fashion. Women put bread to rise. Men coiled ropes no one had asked for. Toward dusk, the lighthouse sent its blink across fields instead of sea. Glass answered from hedgerows where no glass lived. The keeper locked the diary and put the key in a different pocket. A superstition he had not admired in others until it was useful. Proof prefers offices. The thing preferred places without names. The county surveyor laid tracing paper across a map and drew a cautious loop of sightings. The loop included a marsh the army had borrowed for experiments and a half-built hangar meant for an airship that had not arrived. The hangar kept its ribs to the weather and its doors chained open, a mouth prepared to be polite. Inside, dust lay in lanes that suggested drafts had practiced going somewhere. A rope burn showed on the door jamb at a height a cart could not reach. The surveyor found, under a tarpaulin stacked with timbers, an envelope with a list in a tidy clerk's hand. Ballast, lamp oil, dry biscuits, pliers, coil, blanket, whistle, 5 lunches. Beside 5, someone had later written 4, then 5 again. He pocketed the paper, because paper asks to be pocketed. Outside, the marsh made a sound like air thinking. A line of reed heads trimmed themselves as if a narrow thing had passed just above them. Newspapers learned to make a column that could be cut to fit any day. Visitant returns. Authorities unmoved. Reporters asked Germany for denial and received it in neat paragraphs. A letter arrived for the keeper bearing only his title and county, and a sentence from a woman in Leeds who had seen the same lamps and wanted to know if they ever landed because she had a message they could carry if they liked. That night, cloud lowered like a reconsidered promise. The hangar doors swung once and stayed. A watchman smoking in his hut believed he heard canvas complain softly the way sails do when they remember work. He went to look and found only cold air arranging itself. The mark on the jamb shone a little where tar had been warmed recently by nothing he could name. There are files for the sensible and drawers for the rest. The Admiralty's file took copies of telegrams, the chemist's plates, 3 statements disputing the child's brass thimble, and 2 requesting its return in the public interest. A clerk typed a heading, Phantom Zeppelin East, then corrected it to airship, unidentified, and finally to lights, reported, which pleased no one but policy. In a private drawer, the same clerk kept a page torn from the hangar envelope, because lists belong near the things they summon. Meanwhile, the thing, to call it that, offends accuracy and flatters fear, continued to be present by absence. Hedges remembered a passage without breaking. A canal wore ripples that crossed the wind. A church bell trembled on its pin as if thinking of rehearsal. In the telegraph office, the sounder offered a long dash each night at 9:11, and the clerk, who disapproved of ghosts, tapped back the time and received a single courteous dot. The keeper's diary accumulated observations that would not behave as entries. On one page, the ink had risen in tiny beads as if the paper perspired. On another, salt bloomed along the edge, though the sea lay 2 miles off and sleeping. He dreamed of canvas bent around emptiness and woke to find the lantern glass, wearing a ring of condensation that did not mind the wind. By the end of the month, the town possessed, like a congregation, a shared discipline. Look up at the hour, listen for nothing, allow the cat indoors, tie the gate. Housewives folded a fifth sandwich into husbands' pockets without admitting the arithmetic. A boy learned to whistle a note that roused dogs and grew silent when the new star appeared where stars have no business. The clerk labeled a final folder Aftermath and left it empty on purpose, which is sometimes the only tidy choice. Years find a shelf for almost anything. The photographs hang in the museum above a case where the brass fitting sits on green baize and refuses to fit any known thread. The hangar is a ruin with polite signage. In certain weathers, its doors heave inward an inch and then breathe out again. The diary lives behind glass, open to a page where the ink has ghosted a second line beneath itself that reads, faint as a well-mannered echo. Arrived. Sometimes on a clear March night, the lighthouse throws its white coin across empty air, and something returns it from a place that admits no structure. A ripple runs the length of the beet fields as if a hand passed just above the leaves. In the churchyard, the bell tests its clapper once like a question and forgets the answer. Cats watch roofs instead of birds. The clerk's drawer, inherited by another man entirely, still contains the list with the lunches. It has browned to the color of tea and continues to refuse arithmetic. Historians, careful people with damp thumbs, file the business under scare ships, misreadings, Venus at strange angles, tricks of ducting along cold layers. They are not wrong. They are also not alone. The watchman's grandson keeps a whistle by the bed because his son likes to hear it, and sometimes, only sometimes, the note goes out and comes back farther off than the hedge will allow. Stand on the coastal road at 9:11 and count 3 slow blinks from the tower. Between the second and the third, a small additional star will learn its place and hold it without flicker. No voices, only glass, thinking of frost. Rope that was never tied rattling briefly in still air, and the sound of something long and patient, moving just out of argument with gravity. As if sky had learned to fall and then changed its mind to spare the field.